our first home in 2010. This marks the 15th anniversary of our Live and Learn series.
Wow.
And Live and Learn is a thing that, you know, our grandmothers and our aunties used to say, well, live and learn, child, live and learn, you know. And we found ourselves saying that a great deal as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was preparing in 2007 for a 3-year project that would guide us to the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. The more we dug about the role of Pennsylvania and the Civil War, the more we used the phrase live and learn. First series was sponsored by Borders Books, and it was a very unique partnership. Borders Books at that time was at the height of their popularity, and we would train historic characters to go out across Pennsylvania and appear in Borders bookstores in a kind of a reverse book club. They would get you interested enough to buy the book through their historic connections to the stories. And then we'd ask you to read the book and come back a month later and we would connect with the authors at that time. As Borders Books transitioned, the Pennsylvania Department of DCED, the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, and the Pennsylvania Humanities Council sponsored Live and Learn series. And the Humanities Council would purchase the books. DCED would place those books at community centers, usually shopping malls, trying to reach constituencies that didn't know that they didn't know, you know, and continuing the notion of live and learn. And we devoted our last year's series to the late, great Joseph Kelly, the executive director of Pennsylvania Humanities Council, who selected the books. And then Joe passed away and we floated again, and we moved into the 6 counties of central Pennsylvania, and each county's tourism office sponsored the Live and Learn series as we rotated around the region. And we began to connect at that time to the notion of the Underground Railroad, that each of those county offices was a safe house for us to tell the stories about people who were left out of history. The books in that period came from private contributors who would buy 20 books for us to give out at the event, and the bookstores that were in the towns connected. Then COVID came, and Gamut and the Dauphin County Library System hosted our segments without audiences, where we would present in empty rooms to an audience, which is out there now. And I'd like to say hello to all of you, because you kept us literally alive and excited as you followed us across the last 18 months of our series. So now we've come home. This is a hybrid program. The 2022-23 season is devoted to the theme Animating Democracy. And it's about moving from our major 2020 and 22 project, which was the creation of a monument to the value of the vote, to animating the community and integrating the commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment. with the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, that cultural literacy and multicultural literacy were coming together at the crossroads of time, where the notion of remembrance of the struggle for the value of the vote and the honor of those people, known and unknown, who helped to pass those two amendments would come together through the literature and the act of practicing your franchise. We talked to the public school system in all 6 counties and discovered that civics courses had been dropped. And in fact, it was the public libraries that were the places where civics courses were being taught. So with our partnership for the Chester Welcome Center, the Living History Workshop, and the advancement of our concept of animating democracy, we begin this evening with both the theme and the architects of that national movement. We want to start by talking about building memory. And I've asked Harrisburg's poet laureate, Rick Kearns, if he'll talk about building the Thomas Morris Chester memory box. If you remember putting a puzzle together, and once you got it together, you discovered that it was a great piece of art, that will be what the Thomas Morris Chester memory box is. Artifacts with when you put them together and you arrange them in time and place, you get the art of citizenship. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The memory box is both a physical and an online entity. What we've started to do, well, first I should mention my first interactions with Team Morris Chester go back to 1986 and 87. I wrote a biographical sketch of Chester in 87. And since then, off and on, all through that time, I have learned more and researched more about Chester. And every time I talk to somebody else, talk to other researchers, talk to other historians, I'm learning something new. So potentially, what we could see with the memory box is a pretty large entity, okay? Because the man was amazing. Okay? We have a physical box here in the Dauphin County Library where we are beginning to identify and eventually hopefully get some items lent or donated to us that will be here in the center. It will also include documents, okay? Lots and lots of documents. So towards that end, I have set up for our first stage a Dropbox specifically devoted to items relating to Chester and his amazing career. Now we have tentatively 4 content folders. And the first would be his community and early life, which, as we know, is right here in downtown Harrisburg, and his folks' oyster restaurant. His education and journeyman period, when he started his long, part of the amazing thing about the man is the amount of education that he received in this country and elsewhere. Okay. The third folder would be relating to his service and professional career, which is wildly complicated, actually. And last but not least, legacy and contributions. Okay. So these are our general categories for now. Okay. I anticipate that once we start acquiring printed material as well as artifacts, that this could become much bigger. Okay. Now, the other thing I need to point out is that I'm sort of semi-supervising a group of remarkable people that we have been referring to as the history detectives, which includes Dauphin County Library staff. And I'd like to mention the group, Dr. David Pettigrew at Messiah, Dr. Jean Corey also at Messiah, Caleb Jackson, who is probably the preeminent scholar of Black Harrisburg, Eric Jackson, who is also a scholar and performer and minister, Brian and Kim Williams, who are a husband and wife research team who are doing wonderful work, Barbara Barksdale, a humanist, Yvonne Carmichael from the library system, Tyler Stump from the State Archives, and last but not least, this amazing individual beside me. And so we've had a couple meetings already, and we're in the process of collecting printed material into the Dropbox, into the internet Dropbox. Each of these folks has their own folder within that Dropbox. Okay. And the people included, and I'm sorry, I didn't bring their names, includes 4 students of Dr. Pettigrew at Messiah.
These are master's students
Mm-hmm.
in public education, in media, in library sciences, who are each shadowing one of the history detectives, scholars, humanists, educators. We call them the history detectives because, Andy, because you give them a date or a clue, and they're off 2 weeks later, they come in with literally pounds of research and
material, right? And so the general outline of our process so far has been put into 3 phases. Okay. Right now, we have just begun the first phase, which is gathering material and naming files. Okay, so everybody's going to be putting year or year range in their separate files. Okay? As well as making sure that their names are on the donated files. I have to emphasize this, that we want to make sure to give credit where credit is due. And we have a lot of very intelligent people working on this. We want to make sure everybody gets proper credit. And so we have just started to place things into this Dropbox format. There remains a lot of work to be done to finish this part of the process.
That work is being supported by the Giant Company and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. Their theme this year is engage, educate, and elevate. So we're in the engaged process right now. We're asking you to engage in reaching under your bed, up in your closet, into your Bible, in that box that grandma gave you or your uncle said, store for me in the garage. In those things, we find incredible primary and secondary documents. Primary documents are the things that relate to your family, but secondary documents are the rest of the people in the picture, the people in the background, the person who signed the wedding papers, the funeral home that signed the death certificate. These are all pieces of that puzzle that we hope to put together like an anagram to tell the story. If I could go forward very quickly.
Sure.
Those of you who are in our Zoom audience know that's a term I use a lot, going backward to go forward. So Thomas Morris Chester was born here in 1834. His parents owned land, which meant that they voted in 1834. They voted until 1838 when the Constitution of Pennsylvania was changed and African Americans and people of color who were landowners lost the right to vote. So for Thomas Morris Chester, his parents were citizens and lost that citizenship. And the frailty of citizenship and the responsibility is one of the things we want to talk about. They sent him to Pittsburgh, and he went to Avery College, which Avery, we know, was an abolitionist. And that Avery College system and line leads us to Duquesne University today, and a great body of work there. But Pittsburgh primarily knows Chester and claims him as their own because of his work with Martin Delany. And would you speak quickly about that work with Martin Delany?
Well, I'm not as familiar with his work with Delany, so I can't really speak about that.
Delany was a back to Africa advocate, a colonizationist. Delany believed that free men of color would not receive a chance here. And so he sent Chester as a delegate and a deputy to Africa. Chester traveled through Liberia and looked at that model. He traveled through the Niger, and he was in Nigeria at the time that the war broke out. And his mother asked him to come back to Harrisburg and help to recruit first a Black militia, and then in 1863, and he recruited for the United States colored troops. And the first 200 men that left Pennsylvania for Massachusetts for the 54th and 55th, which is what the movie Glory is all about. So from there, he went to London to become a barrister.
Yes, indeed.
And then on to St. Louis and traveled as a journalist with the Army of the Pacific as the first Black journalist. So we find him everywhere. Those of you who are listening, you know, you own Chester too. You know, look in your public library, look in your history. We are happy to work with you to scan or digitize, borrow or copy those documents that help us put together this incredible man's life. But we're just at the beginning of this journey. And so we invite you to, in your communities, to look for Chester. And if you don't want to look for Chester, look for your own family. Reach under the bed and start your own memory box. You know, start pulling out documents. We are losing elders like crazy. Interview your elders. Ask them to identify. There was a long period of time where we wrote no names on the back of pictures. Ask them to write the names on the back of those pictures before they're gone again. And we'll have to set our history detectives out to find your family's history. We found the family of Jacob Compton by discovering the late, great Jimmy Wood and Mr. Ellison, whose name, Ron Ellison, the musician, who were both descendants of Jacob Compton. When I say we, I have to say Caleb Jackson, you know, because that's exactly how that came to be. But the reason why we have the face of Jacob Compton is because his relatives came together, Kimeka, and we hired a court reporter to sit with the artists and draw composites of the images. So no piece of the puzzle is too small to bring to us. And Rick's on his journey, and he's going to be back with us through the series. We'll talk about how we develop that memory box, both one that you can touch by coming to the center or one that you can access by going through the digital collection. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Sure.
Good hunting.
I did want to mention one other thing. I was familiar with his trips to Liberia. I didn't know as much about Delany, but one of the things that's already in our memory box is an edition of the Star of Liberia, which is the newspaper he started. in Monrovia in 1859. And 1859, so he was 25 years old. Okay, he had been to Avery. He had also been to Thetford Academy in Vermont, and blew away all his teachers. Everybody was so impressed, and didn't know how to. They did not know how to deal with Chester. They did not know how to deal with it, and he just kept going and kept going. And he did, on Delaney's behalf, but also on his own behalf. He traveled to Liberia, and he had extensive experiences there in that first visit, and then he went back. So tracking this guy is going to take a lifetime. We're still, I also just placed into the box an article we found from 1884, where he's referred to as General Chester, because he was a brigadier general.
He was brigadier general of the Louisiana National Guard in 1884 as an African-American at the time of Jim Crow and at the fall and implosion of Reconstruction. It's a pretty incredible achievement. So if you're in Pittsburgh, he's a homeboy. If you're in New Orleans, he's a homeboy. If you're in Philadelphia, since he addressed the Philadelphia Library Company, and talked about the importance of public libraries, he's a homeboy. Wherever you find Chester, you'll probably find a giant company. So if you want to get to us, go visit your giant, and we thank them for sponsoring Rick's research, and we'll have Rick back a lot. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much.
Kimeka, will you join us? Rick's going to come back and join us at the end of and we're going to vote. Those of you who are in our Zoom audience know you can put questions in the chat, and after our keynote presentation from Barbara, all three of our guests will come and we'll try to answer some of the chat. I am amazed that Rosa Parks was 22 years old when she started the movement. I am amazed that Frederick Douglass was 18 years old when he decided to rise up on his own quest of freedom. I am amazed that Thomas Morris Chester was 25 years old when he was in Liberia teaching and starting a newspaper. And it amazes me that we think of Frederick Douglass now as a gray-haired, old, venerable person, but the arbiters and the architects of these movements were young people. And so we thought that in our equilateral triangle of reaching back on one point of it to understand the present as the second point, that we had to be looking ahead also to those future change makers and thought leaders, those people who are ready to pass the torch to a new generation. That's why we ask Dr. Kimeka Campbell, who is on the crest of the movement of young leadership in this community, to come and speak with us about animating democracy and making history matter. And also the notion of why should we remember, and how does remembrance become a blueprint for where we're going. So welcome, Kimeka.
Thank you for having me. This is so wonderful. What quite an introduction, eh? That's pretty nice.
I need to start by talk about the present work you're doing now.
Okay. Well, I am the Vice President of the Young Professionals of Color, Greater Harrisburg, and we have been in existence since 2016. And we have really been working to create community for the Black and Brown Professional Collective here. And that is our mission. Our vision is to live and participate in a democratic society in which our professional, social, civic contributions are valued and are able to grow and be cultivated. So that is what we're looking forward to. And we're doing that through connecting organizations, people, various entities within and out of the state, out of the city, state, county, to each other. One of our chief administrative officer, Elise Irvis, said it best when we first started this journey in 2017. She said, I want young professionals of color to be the ecosystem connector in the community, to make sure that we are all aware of each other and what we are doing so that we can make the road by walking together. So that is a little bit about what's going on with us and why we're doing what we're doing in the community.
Now, we need a kind of neon glossary for this. So for the purpose of this conversation, he said in an elderly voice, what are you referring to as young? And what population are you trying to reach?
So like I said, I was I also have a show. Black Newsbeat is a collaboration between Open Stage here in downtown Harrisburg and YPOC. And the folks there asked me the same thing. They said, now what is, when you say young, what do you mean?
What is young?
And I said, this is young as you feel. You know why? Because when my husband and I started this journey, we are both founders of the organization. We had fancied ourselves to be, you know, kind of like older young, if that makes sense.
Older young.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and now we're like, are we young? We always ask ourselves, are we the young ones? And how do we cultivate a spirit of youth and discovery without putting up any barriers to anyone who wants to be involved? So we always say, it's as young as you feel.
It's as young as you feel.
Mm-hmm.
You made me even feel older, right? With that.
Well, I wanted to tell you.
I
wanted to tell you, I was so happy to hear you mention the young people. You were naming off the ages of all of those innovators and historical figures and when they started. So I'm like, how old does he think I am? Or young?
You know? Well, it's important because we set out to talk about the value of a vote in a state that was, you know, to brag a little bit for those of you or from many other states who are with us. Pennsylvania was the 4th state in the Union to pass the 15th Amendment and the 7th state in the Union to pass the 19th Amendment. We were the first state in the Union to pass the Gradual Abolitionist Act and the first state in the Union to pass what was then called the Free Soil Act, which was if you were in Pennsylvania for 6 months and 1 day, then you were free. And that is why Pennsylvania was the destination for the Underground Railroad until the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, where people who had grounded themselves here had to pick up and move further north and towards Canada. But we are concerned by a statistic which says that, and I'm sorry, I don't want to quote it, but you can Google it, X thousands of young people reach the voting age by 18, but usually don't vote until their 25th birthday. So that's 7 years of a powerful voting age. When we look at Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, who published her first poems at 13, who published her first book at 20, you know, if we are waiting to 25 for our young people to vote, what are we doing wrong?
Well, that is an excellent question. And I think part of the answer of what we are doing wrong is just what you said, and that is making democracy inaccessible, right? And as a culture, as a society, we have made democracy something that we are constantly chasing instead of something that we're living and breathing every day, right? We're always, you know, progress is going to take 35 years. So people kind of just throw up their hands and go, okay, if it's going to take 35 years, then see in 35 years, I'm gonna live my life until then. And I remember, a lot of people don't know this about me, but my family's from Trinidad and Tobago. And I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Florida. And I'm happy to be in the state that had the first graduate abolition and coming from the country that had the first emancipation celebration in the world. And so being able to come from a historical grounding of being free, and freedom meaning the ability to vote and be active in your society, was something that my mom instilled in me, that, you know, my aunts and uncles, this active participatory way of living, and voting to me seemed like a natural kind of extension of that. So when I turned 18, I was of voting age, and I was in Florida during hanging Chad season. That was my first election. And I remember it was such a turnoff that I didn't vote for 4 years, because my vote truly did not count in Florida, in Tallahassee, Florida. It didn't count. It literally didn't count. So when you have young people who grow up in these societies and these communities where voting is so hotly contested, and you see the people who are supposed to be the adults in the room, right, treating each other in such a way that, I mean, it's frankly quite nasty and terrifying sometimes. Who would want to participate in that? It becomes this incentivizing activity. And so part of what we have been doing with YPOC is trying to at least start here, right here where we work, live, play, eat, drink, do all the things, with just talking to each other one-on-one to find out, well, what was your de-incentivizing moment? And how can we reconstruct that into something that would make you want to come out and participate? Because I just was talking about this last night. Every single day there are initiatives and bills and resolutions and all kinds of things that are being voted on that affect our lives right now. Right now, as we sit here, things were voted on this week. Today's Thursday, that were discussed in city council, that were discussed in commissioner's offices, that were discussed in senators and representatives at the PA House, that were discussed at the House of Representatives for the United States and the Congress of the United States today, just this week. And we sit here and we allow, right? We give up some of our power to affect that, because we're letting what we see, and sometimes how it affects us, de-incentivize us. So to me, and to the folks that I work with, reconstructing those de-incentivizing experiences is at the crux of how we get past this 18 to 25 gap. We started a small part of YPOC, another arm of YPOC called Who's Running for Office, just to try to affect voter turnout in the city, right? Only 33% of all the registered voters in the city, I think it's even less than that. I think I'm shooting a little high. I think it's like 17 to 20% of people in the city of Harrisburg proper vote. That's it. And we're talking president, it's even less on the off years. So, and this could be one of the most powerful voting blocks in this county and in this region, if people would, and they're registered. This is the interesting part about it. They are registered,
but
they
not
are
voting.
registered, but not voting.
Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure.
That's right.
So what do you tell young people about endurance, and how the franchise and how citizenship is part of their not only surviving, but thriving and enduring.
Thriving, enduring. And the one thing about thriving and enduring I have learned the hard way is that you have to rest. And that sounds really counterintuitive to the words thriving and enduring, right, because I've burnt myself out. 2020 was a burnout year for a lot of us. And it was for me.
Let the church say,
because in a year where a lot of people were inside, a lot of things were cracked wide open that required 2000% of our attention. And with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the pandemic, how Black and brown folks were treated during the pandemic, fighting vaccine misinformation, trying to deal with how our students were learning or not learning. One of the biggest gaps in what happened with the pandemic was how Black and brown students right here in just the 3 or 4 school districts that are touching the Harrisburg School District, how they were the first ones to fall out of school in the online format and they were not captured. So we're sitting here now in a time 2 years after coming out of a 2.5 year, 3 year pandemic, where it is a stark fissure now, right? Now it's a canyon of the need to recapture and to reintroduce to students what they need to know, what we say they need to know at these ages, right? Some people call it learning loss. Some people have issues with that word, but whatever we want to call it, students now are having to deal with what they didn't have the opportunity to capture in those years. There's so many things. And all of that was like, so what you gonna do, YPOC? What y'all gonna do? And we're like, well, we're trying to do everything, right? We were trying to do everything. Burnout. And I remember sitting there at the end of 2020, going into 2021, going, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore, but I want to do it anymore and I have to do it anymore. How do you get through that? So the first answer was, you need to rest a lot more. If you're going to be doing this intensive kind of work, you got to rest. The second part is making space for social emotional connection. A lot of folks feel like they're being preached at and not necessarily included in the very structures and the brick building part of how you even do any of this, right? So to that end, we have a little group that meets on Tuesdays. We call it Tipsy Tuesday, but
Tuesday.
We meet every single week. And part of it, we drink a little wine. I drink, sometimes I had to stop drinking wine for a while because it was, you can't live your life like that. Where it's like every time you see something in the world like blow up, you're like, so it's like I had to like step back a little bit, but we still meet every Tuesdays and we talk about every single happening and we connect it back to why we need to be involved.
Now, right? I want to invite you back because you touched on so many subjects that'll be across but with the time that we have left, I'll ask you two questions. First, about your own past with your placemaking, your concept of the importance of place, particularly in communities of color, which are literally vanishing off the map. What is the importance of place and place memory?
So I am a place and space researcher. I am a student of place pedagogy and cultural historical activity theory. Those two things, those couple of things I just said kind of guide how I have in the last 10 to 12 years come to understand the importance of place and the importance of the impression of place upon the people who inhabit place. And it was with that kind of understanding that I even came to this area. So when my husband and I first came here, we just got here in like 2011, 12. And I say just because when you talk to people who are from Harrisburg or from Central PA, they go, you're not from here. How long you been here? Oh, you only been here a decade. I'm like, oh, that's like a whole decade. But, and
try 40 years,
right?
And you're still not from here.
See what
like
we're going, and it's exactly, oh, you're not from here. I'm like, I concede I am not from here, but I always say I'm not from here, but I'm invested in here. I am invested in this place. So we came, and the first question for me and my husband were like, where are all the Black people? Ain't this a Black city? I don't see no Black. Where the Black people at? And that was the question we had to start with because we wanted to know. And because what we were hearing, the more we heard, oh, well, you shouldn't go into Harrisburg because you're going to get shot. Or oh, you're not going to Harrisburg because, oh, the crime. We were like, well, where are the Black people at? Because I feel like these are dog whistles for don't go near the Black people. And so we were like, well, where are they at? That's where we want to be.
And the opposite is the Black people saying we don't go there.
Yes.
So we talked about that just before we started.
That's right.
Talk about this notion of, oh, we don't go there, or we're not welcome there. And how do we bridge?
Downtown is not for us.
Yes.
Midtown is not for us, right? And so what I had to do, and because I'm a place space researcher, I said, well, what is the history of the place? We're saying it's not for us, and we shouldn't be, or we're not welcome there, but wasn't the Black Wall Street up there on 6th Street? Wasn't Midtown a historic Black neighborhood in Harrisburg? Wasn't Shipoke just over a generation ago?
Didn't we box at the Powell Auditorium, which is now HMAC?
So
cultural center,
that's right. So when you start to understand the historicity of a place and the culture of a place, you cannot fool people anymore into believing that it's not for them. You can stand on the history and on the information of history and say, oh, no, you're here now, but more than just you belongs here. And we belong here because we built this place, the eighth ward.
But
Let's talk about all those
I
things.
have to acknowledge the sense memory, things that have been passed down to us through enculturation about places. I have to remember that Harrisburg is one of 3 cities that put up Martin Luther King Boulevard signs and then took them down because white merchants refused to put that name up. I have to remember that Black people didn't go across the bridge to City Island because City Island had its own police department.
But do you see the contest?
So these are things that.
But do you see the contest?
Yes.
The contestation is for place and space. You can't name this place because it means something to me, and I don't want it to mean something to you. You can't occupy this place because if you come into the place, it means something different to me than I want it to mean for you. So the very contest of place has always been, for the literal terra, the literal ground, has always been the fight. It has always been the fight. And it's part of why what the work that you're doing, the work that YPOC is doing, the work that so many folks in this room is doing is so important, because when the place is space imbued with meaning, and the contestation of meaning in place and space is why there is war, why people are hotly contesting these things, why racism is allowed to flourish in certain ways, because the contestation of meaning in place, that's where it's at.
And that's why it's so exciting when you come through the front door of the Chester Center. The first quote is "your place."
Yes,
and
I love it.
We the Underground Railroad and its model of management, not only its mythology and its romance, but its model of management talked about safe houses. So that is what we're trying to do here at the Chester Center. At the other end of Chester Way, at the opposite end of the monument, is a place where if you have been immersed in the beauty of public art and you wonder about that piece, that you can come and immerse yourself in this place. But one more question, and you've been generous. So in a community where civics is not taught in our schools, in a culture that makes things up like fajita pitas and pizza bagels, in a community that has truncated a thing called President's Day, when we don't even understand which president or why, or what was the difference between Washington's philosophy of 3/5, and Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. How are communities of all colors supposed to get a grip on history as a blueprint, and how can that blueprint solve some of the issues that young people, particularly in your organization,
first of all, make the library great again? Okay, libraries are, to me, one of the central community places where you learn things that you don't learn elsewhere, and it should be that in so many different respects. During Juneteenth this year, I was very fortunate to work with the Dauphin County Library System. They did all of our printing. They also did a story walk. They also did a profile on us. They also, collaborated with us and legitimized a lot of what we were trying to do by simply being a partner. And I'm hoping in turn that people will understand, in a new way, the importance of libraries. Having programs like this, where folks like me can come and talk with, giants in the community like you. This is how you keep that living history alive and connecting it to what people are doing in the present, connecting it, making the connect, and being very intentional about making these connections, connecting it to the communities, the businesses, the organizations, the people who you think are undesirable, right? In the neighborhood, people have very interesting, perspectives on homelessness, but even that's connected back to the history of the place. And so, in order to do so that, to kind of answer in not even a fraction of that question, first is make communal learning spaces like a library central parts of the community where there is no restriction on how you learn. You literally could discover anything in a library, right? And holding the people who put the things in the library accountable to what is in here, right?
I choked on the word accountability. Yes, indeed.
Right?
As they say in my
Right?
neighborhood.
So, my good
like,
friend out here is in the audience. This is Mr. Foistos. He's one of the people I look up to with just he has been, and I've been on his program, the Reading 365, but making sure that people are reading. And his daughter and I, Madison, she's my friend, by the way. Her and I had really transformative experiences in 365. I'm talking tears and self-discovery from reading. All we did was read a couple passages in a book. So if that can happen in a 30-minute small chunk just from reading a book, why wouldn't a place like a library, right? A cultural experience center that is the library be the nexus of the next big thing, the next breakthrough in the community? Why wouldn't it be? Right.
So I'm hoping that our children are the war, the youth, young people are the woof, and the elders are the loom on which we weave some understanding of the importance of citizenship through dialogue and exchange. Please come back. We want you to talk about Juneteenth soon.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
Lean over here and get my kiss. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
Dr. Kimeka Campbell. Yeah. So now we're ready for my friend Barbara Schaffer Bacon, who has been all over the world and back a couple of times, has seen this diversity movement in all its names and all its forms, all its visions, and all its failures. Because this is not a new, ride we're on towards cultural literacy and cultural competency. This is a seasonal challenge that we must massage like the muscles in our body. So I want to welcome, for the time that we have left, our good friend Barbara Schaffer Bacon, who will give us a primer on animating democracy, and then we'll ask our guests to take your questions. Barb.
All right. I am delighted to participate with you. I come to Harrisburg to work and learn with Lenny, and had not so many things intervened, I'd be there in person. And I can't say enough about the excitement of seeing the Chester Center and hearing about all the ways it will be used and what it is featuring, because in 2006, Lenny invited me to participate with the Underground Railroad group, with the past players, with the Live and Learn dialogues, to bring some training around the arc of dialogue and how we can do dialogue in so many ways and so many settings. And I've had the honor and privilege to learn that by working with artists and cultural organizations and historians and others around the country. I'm not the artist. I'm the great observer, cheerleader, fangirl of this work. And so I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Animating Democracy. We're going to decide maybe to take a look at a couple of videos that give us an idea of some flavor of some of that work. And so, Ashley, I think I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes, and I just have to make sure I've got the right screen up to do that with. So I might have just done the opposite of what I want. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so that's up, and we want it to be big, and then I say this. So forgive me for my technological stuff here. But we'll get it together. And I'm going to share that screen. And you should be seeing something that looks like a PowerPoint. Is that good? Yes. All right. Let's do it. Come on. It seems to be a little slow. I probably have too many windows open here on my piece. So since 1999, at Americans for the Arts, an organization that does a lot of the organizing work around advocacy for arts and culture and public funding for arts and culture. We had an opportunity that the Ford Foundation seeded to really look at the power of arts and culture to contribute, especially to civic dialogue and civic engagement, and more broadly to social change. So we got a big grant, which is always a good thing. And we shared that by identifying 35 projects around the country that were experimenting in some way with arts and culture. What we took away from the 35 projects that I won't have time to tell you all about was, what is this power that artists and arts and culture bring to civic experience? And so we began to say, what can we really put across, how they create indelible images, and I'm going to share some that you may be quite familiar with in a bit, connecting people across real boundaries, imagined boundaries, communicating through beauty but also beyond the limits of language, and expressing difficult ideas through metaphor, through humor, through movement. These are the ways that arts and culture are powerful forces for illuminating civic experience. And I had the great fortune to actually observe past players who not only suit up for their work as interpreters, but were actually leading dialogues in character. And we saw how them staying in character, speaking from the place and time, was able to create a kind of neutral facilitation for dialogues, but also to gently bring past into the present in terms of how past and history really inform the present. Can I keep moving here? I think of the AIDS Memorial Quilt as a great way to get a handle on the many ways the arts can be important to civic engagement and dialogue, because it was something that worked at many, many levels. You have to go back into the 70s to know and remember that folks who were dying of AIDS could not be buried. No cemeteries wanted them, no funeral homes wanted to work with them, and their families were not being able to memorialize, to celebrate, to commemorate the lives of their loved ones. And so the AIDS Memorial Quilt concept, the idea of creating squares for your loved ones, originated from that need. And the creativity that was expressed and the ability of folks to find a way to express that and then to share it with others was powerful. So when the AIDS Memorial Quilt came together on the National Mall, there was a real recognition that the AIDS was not the problem of a problematic subculture, but rather something that was touching families across the lines of economics, social, religious, color lines, that it couldn't be put in a small box anymore. And from that day on the mall, the power for advocacy and policy, funding for research and drugs, all of that emanated not solely from the quilt, but you get to see the power and the role that the arts played along that trajectory. When we think about the roles that the arts play, we have talked about art as a spark, as a place to begin to get the conversation moving. You're looking at a safe house that was designed by Mel Chin in New Orleans, and its purpose was to keep $100, which the little girl is holding, and those $100 were our folks throughout the United States creating dollars that could be turned into Congress in exchange for the funds to address lead poisoning in soil in New Orleans, which had been a problem before Katrina, was still a problem, and had a solution that simply required a specific investment. So the idea of creating $100 and putting them in a safe house, and this was literally a shotgun house in New Orleans with that door, And that space was a space for community conversation. We think of art as an invitation. To your right side, you see a play that's happening in Lima, Ohio. It's talking about why the city and county can't get together on water policies that gets the water from the rest of the county into the city. And the play, which looked at perspectives on that from all over the county and from all the different segments and sectors, was used as the centerpiece for a big community conference where action groups were formed to do many things to improve relations within the community and within the city and county. We think of art as literally creating space, both metaphoric as an immigrant talking to the Pope, and real as the Esperanza Center for Art and Civic and Social Justice, which you see on the top side of the left. And there you see one of the city councilors in San Antonio doing a workshop as to really inform citizens, as Kimeka was just talking about what are the issues and how is it affecting us, and keeping people engaged and motivated and mobilized. And last, you see some folks who are exchanging on the top in freestyle. They're having a debate. Literally, the topic of that debate was, is a ghetto a good or a bad thing? Is a ghetto a place that we call home that has all the familiars? Is it a place that is, automatically we know it's crime and bad? So there, it's the freestyle back and forth that's really driving. And then on the bottom, we're talking about genetics. These folks have all just seen an exhibition, and Liz Lehrman, there in the center, is actually leading a dialogue through movement to capture people's responses to the creative work they just saw in the galleries around the museum. So lots of different kinds of examples there to get you a sense. And here's where my work with Lenny began. And I wanted to take note of the fact that it happened in 2006, and we worked continuously over many years. From that point, I got to meet many of the people that were just named, like Eric Jackson, and work together. And I thought I'd share these two quotes from Lenny that have helped to drive our work. And I'll give you a chance to take a quick look. I don't know if you remember saying these, Lenny. But they're moving. When truths are continually challenged and expanded in a dynamic telling and retelling of the past through diverse perspectives and voices, history can itself be the kind of dialogic and democratic process. By virtue of their continued presence, think about the space you're sitting in right now. In communities, historic sites and related heritage tourism can generate sustained examination of history and civic and social concerns of the present. Lenny was saying it all. The two photos on this page, I'll actually show you a better picture later. The top photo is in a church in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, and there the youth are sitting in a slave gallery, thinking about the marginalization that was happening there. The latter picture is at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, where they were showing the Without Sanctuary exhibition of photographs and postcards of lynchings across America. And this was a space set up for dialogue in many different forms to help folks process what they were seeing in that exhibition. How am I doing, Lenny? Here's dance happening. Here's urban bushwomen, and especially you can see some tension in both these pictures. This was Hair Stories. It was a beautiful evening length dance performance that was put together, and all of the material for it that animated the dances and the choreography were built on the stories that company members had collected in Black communities, talking about the reality of how hair affected their social existence in their communities. What were all the kinds of things that went on? So you can see the hot comb blues experience on the right, and the picture on the left is in an elevator. So imagine that that's the scene where everybody's saying, wow, that shaved head, huh? But not letting her know that that's what they're looking at. I'm going to have to run through a couple of these more quickly to get to where we want to be. Animating Democracy had a chance to really, I'm going to come back here, there, to study projects deeply, to really do deep documentation and look at the kinds of outcomes with a broad lens. So our work was about making meaning. It was action-based research. And the result of that were these 6 publications, sets of case studies, and a findings book around art and civic dialogue. And I'm going to get here. We took that work forward to begin to look at how we could talk about how arts and culture are making a difference in civic dialogue, in civic engagement, and came to this continuum that really looks at the many ways we can talk about how we're making contributions. Is it to building knowledge and awareness, to contributing to what people know, what their understanding is, how aware they are, to what people communicate through deliberation, dialogue, media, about what people feel or think about an issue in terms of values, vision. We know that the arts and culture are playing, in addition to civic engagement, large roles in community planning, community engagement activities that are helping to envision a neighborhood in a new way, change a narrative about a community. But also capacity and know-how. When Kimeka was speaking about the work of your organization, which sounds fantastic, you're building social capital that's really clear, and folks together are helping to build each other's skills and social capital. And we see the arts playing big roles there. Also participation and mobilization. And finally, all of that also contributing directly sometimes to specific kinds of systems change and condition change that are creating better access, better equity, and so on. I'm tempted to stop there and show a video, Lenny. Would that be okay?
And while you're doing the technology, we'll have this collection of books here in the Chester
Great, that's right.
Center as part of it.
I'm going to turn on the light. Hold on a second. That might make me a little better on camera. It's night has fallen here in I'm in Belchertown, Massachusetts. I'm 90 miles west of Boston. So that's where I'm coming from. Okay, so Ashley, the piece I want to show is the Hawaii tape. And I'll just say a little bit to introduce it, and we'll go from there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. So so one of the projects that we did support in Animating Democracy was in North Kohala on the Big Island in Hawaii. And what we learned there was that there had been a sculpture that was being sent from Italy to Honolulu, and it fell off the boat and it sank. So they cast a new statue in bronze and gold, and sent it to Honolulu, and sent the one that sunk to King Kamehameha's birthplace in North Kohala. And then along came the government with one of its very helpful programs, and I mean that seriously, not cynically, called Save Our Sculptures. And a conservator came out to do a conservation plan for the sculpture, and found out that the community had been painting it in lifelike colors. It was not restored to a bronze and gold or gilded frame. And so this quick story will tell you something about what happened there. Go ahead. It does have sound.
For over 120 years, the statue of King Kamehameha the Great has stood a silent vigil in Kohala. When the statue arrived, it had already been painted, and there has never been any reason to change that. Over the years, people from the community maintained the statue, and many of these caretakers added their own creative touches. Kealoha Sugiyama, Kohala's most recent caretaker, took his responsibility very seriously.
Being that I was going to take responsibility, I stood in front of the statue and I said, Kamehameha, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to paint you and make you look real new and nice.
Kohala had cared for the statue the best that they could, but now they needed help from a professional.
We brought a conservator in to look at it, a sculpture doctor. The sculpture doctor says, this is the condition of your sculpture, these are the problems that your sculpture has, these are the ways in which you could could have someone else repair your sculpture, and what is needed to maintain your sculpture.
Conservator Glenn Wharton was brought to Kohala to determine the condition of the statue.
It was sort of this mythical sculpture that everyone talked about, but few people had seen. So I wanted to go out to the end of the highway in Kohala and see it for myself. I'm not sure I've ever seen a bronze sculpture painted like that. My initial take as a conservator was, let's figure out how to get the paint off so we can bring it back to what the artist originally wanted. That's my training. That's what we do.
The normally sleepy community of Kohala was now concerned. What was this outsider planning on doing to their statue?
The first time I met Glenn,
Ashley, I'm
was
thinking that we should switch to the clip that I have because it's quite a bit shorter. Okay.
Issue about the artist's intent and the artist's
Mm-hmm.
copyright, versus the community or the commissioning entities' rights and ownership of the piece.
All right, let's see if I can get there. Whoops, okay, good. All right, this will get us right to the core. So let me get this one going. And let's see, I'm gonna do a screen share. I'm gonna say share sound and optimize and share.
But what to do? Strip the statue down and repaint it? Or go all the way back to the original creation? Bronze
All right,
and
are you
gold?
seeing it?
No, we're not seeing.
Okay. I haven't.
Glenn was anxious to prepare a
Up
conservation treatment plan for the statue.
Why is that doing that? It's playing on my screen, so let's see.
And we're working out, all those of you who are in our virtual audience, we're working out some technical things, but
Sorry.
Nick
Man.
DeFrancesco from the library and I were having a conversation about a monument just today that they're going through. What are the rights of the commissioner versus the rights of the artist?
Glenn was anxious to prepare a conservation treatment plan for the statue, but what to do? Strip the statue down and repaint it? Or go all the way back to the original creation, bronze and gold?
This so-called simple question of shall we gild or paint has somewhat divided our community.
People were telling me, no, we don't want you to gild it. We want you to paint it. I thought, okay, fine, well, maybe we should paint it. And then
I'm sorry?
Is it playing?
No, ma'am, it's frozen now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know why. All right. It says it's paused, but I don't know why or how to stop it. All right, where is it? It's here.
And this brings up, Aisha, commission or culture, which, do we yield to the aesthetics of the artist or the culture of the community that it's placed in? It'd be interesting to.
All right, I've got this part, I've got that part. Now, if I do this and I choose, let's see, is it going to show me where we are? Not that. I want it to be this one, but I don't know if it is. I'm going to try this. What have you got now?
We've got a blank screen.
A blank screen. Wow.
So now we see you.
Oh, no, we don't want that. Okay. Stop has stopped and the window is closed. Okay. All right. I really don't want to give up. I'll be really honest because I love this piece to pieces. So I don't know why I have it on mine, but not on yours. So I'm going to try again. Let's see. Ashley, let's see what we could suggest. Here's it is. And maybe if I escape. Okay. All right, I'm going to escape.
Those of you in the virtual audience, remember that my children refer to me as roadkill on the information highway. And I'm so glad that I'm not the only one who.
I've been, all right, let's get rid of that altogether. And
was it the video labeled part 2?
Perhaps it was.
Okay, let me try playing that one and see if it's the right one.
Let's, I'm looking quickly at the note that I have about that. Let's see. Part 2 shows how. Yes, so let's go there. Yes.
Paint it. I thought, okay, fine, well, maybe we should paint it. And then other people would say, oh no, we should gild it. If it was originally gold leafed, it should be gold leafed.
There was a lot of discussion going on, and Glenn wanted to make sure that he got community input from all, organizations and kupuna and young children.
He wanted to understand about Hawaiian thinking.
And I said, whatever you decide, we will then implement. It was a risk and it was scary to deviate from the sort of track that conservators ordinarily take with an object.
It was finally decided that a vote would be taken, asking all of the residents whether the statue should be gilded or painted.
I was almost disappointed. A vote? What do you mean a vote? Aren't you going to invoke some native Hawaiian method of decision making?
It was gold or good Kanaka skin, yeah.
Just like any other vote in any other small town, the subject of paint or no paint became the topic of conversation.
We don't need a gold statue. I look like Angel Baroni or something.
If I wanted to go with anything, it would probably be gilding.
Now what I would want is the painted one that they have right now.
I wanted it gold leafed. I mean, I thought that would be so nice.
Events were organized to inform, entertain, and inspire the community. In one event, people made Hawaiian puppets for a hula ki'i, or puppet dance. Hula master John Keola Lake wrote a hula ki'i just for Kohala that tells Kamehameha's story through the eyes of birds that perch on the statue's shoulders.
If these are lifelike, then what I want to do is make sure my puppet has not only eyes, but it has pupils.
John Lake taught the hula ki'i to Raylene's Hula Halau. They in turn integrated their performance into educational projects.
So this is all a way to get people involved in the sculpture and what it means to them and the ways in which Kamehameha can still speak to people through this sculpture. And to see this played out, it was just brilliant. And I saw immediately how this is going to work.
And so after cultural performances, public debates, and much discussion between neighbors, it was time to vote.
All of a sudden, people are looking at the statue in a new light and actually thinking about it.
I voted to keep it as is.
I was very vocal about maintaining the gold, and then I reversed my opinions and voted for the painting.
Majority was this color.
Yeah, we all voted this.
I'm traditional. For me, it was paint.
Keep it Kohala style. We wouldn't want to do what Honolulu did.
In the end, after the votes were cast and counted, Kohala tradition prevailed.
Flesh and painted clothing. And
They
you can
wanted-
stop there.
70% of the people voted.
Thank you. So there might be some thoughts about what you just saw. What did you notice in this piece?
Cindy, any comments? I noticed that the process of voting was more important than which color it was.
That's right.
The investment and engagement in public art brought people into the dialogue for the first time that may not have cared one way or the other before.
Yeah, and the creative activities are all intergenerational. Although if you looked at, sort of, it may have just been who they captured, but it seemed to be young people who were saying bronze and gilded, and older people who were saying painted. It's our tradition. I don't know if it really broke down that way. I was able to post both the video links, which are available online, into the chat, so they can be picked up there and they can be part of the material that is connected to this event. But you see, what's really the tail end of this story is that the people of North Kohala learned to have a voice in democratic process. And that was very important because if you're on the side of the Big Island, economic development was creeping right up to them. And as new proposals were coming on board and developers were coming in with new proposals, they had learned to have a voice and they had learned to affect public process and public decision making. And they had learned how to talk and think about the traditions and the cultural objects and heritage that they were working on that made their community their own. And so in a sense, it was important in and of itself, but also a rehearsal for public participation in the future. Lenny, do you want to get into broader discussion? Do you want me to share a few more stories?
Would you share a few more stories?
Okay, let's see. I'm going to do, yeah, can we do the Brett Cook piece, which is the Life is Living video. It's a 6-minute video, Ashley.
Because I think the notion of conflict resolution and using civic dialogue as a way is a product of its own that we want to really talk about. This took on the notion of gentrification, which what happened to our community, or what's happening to our community.
It really did.
Our own Sprocket mural project is beginning to take on those conversations for us through visual literacy.
And this one looks more like an event, but see what you see in the video and the story. The artist is Brett Cook. It's happening in California.
JVD hanging out with you, let it all out. And I'm going to start things off by talking about a wonderful event that happens annually here in the city of Oakland. It's one that brings out hundreds of people, if not maybe a couple of thousand. It takes place at Bobby Hutton Park, and we're talking about the Life is Living Festival. And in the building with us is the one and only well-known artist, renowned Brett Cook. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
The actual neighborhood that Life is Living takes place in, because of redlining practices with banks and real estate companies, was one of the few neighborhoods that black people could live in. And then when you got into the early 60s, it became the locus for the Panthers. So that legacy is still there. A lot of my early work was really concerned with how do I illustrate visually to show people, here's something that's messed up, let me tell you about it. And through the course of being involved in communities and working, I started to recognize that this actually isn't transforming the conditions necessarily. This is really just highlighting the suffering that myself or the themes in this work are going through.
Maybe just take a moment of silence to kind of reflect the healing in ourselves that we want to share with the community today.
And I think it really got the idea really deeply in that if I want the world to be more peaceful, let me make things that are peaceful. And if I want the world to be more inclusive, let me make things that are inclusive. If I want to see multi-ethnic, multi-generational people in the world saying things that are positive, rather than critique that absence, let me just make those things and then they exist in the world. Reflections of Healing has always been a project that's focused on people in Oakland whose work or legacy is about healing. We really worked within the Life is Living ecosystem to pick the models from our own experiences of people who inspired us. So I asked each of the participants to send one question about healing, and then I combined their questions together and then interviewed them with their questions. So in that way, they dictated the focus of the dialogue. So in Infirmary Park will be these 8 cubes. 2 sides of the cubes will be portraits with quotations in different languages around the model. So when someone looks at the young person and reads their quote, I'm hoping part of the trigger is that it inspires the viewer to think about themselves. What does that quote mean to me? What does that mean to my life?
So this specific one, the question was, what are some effective ways of going beyond stereotypes to assess a person or institution's behavior, actions, activities, and character? And what I wrote was cultural competency plus understanding equals unity. So it's really just about understanding our own culture and then learning about each other's culture. Because if there's no understanding, then we can't connect at all.
It's not about creating a hierarchy where somehow they're people we're supposed to look up to. I think for both the models and the viewers, it's for them to think about themselves as healers, to think about all of us as healers, that we all have that power. The wellness clinic kind of has 3 main facets. There's one facet that's movement-based, and then there's another facet of it that's vending, where we have people who are selling products that they've made that are about healing. And then we have another facet that's actually consultations. So we'll have a couple of people there that you can actually speak to about your health. When we talk about health, a lot of times people imagine that when we're sick or diseased that someone else does that for us. And I think part of the aspiration in the wellness clinic is to give people agency for their own health. To think about how our collective health is based on not just my own individual success, that my health is dependent on your health.
You say celebrate life. We often hear that, and sometimes it comes across as new agey. What do you mean celebrate life? Like, I feel that many of us don't really know how to do or even get a chance to do, because the day-to-day grind, how am I going to pay bills? I can't celebrate. I need to get some money on the table. I need to pay rent. Like, I didn't get the new Jordans. Couldn't get into the concert yesterday, those types of things.
Or maybe that there's shootings in Ferguson that are really unjust. And
Right.
I think that those things deserve attention. But I also think that there needs to be a practice of cultivating the idea that life is living, that there is happiness and those things in all of our communities, and people who really champion those values and those actions.
Boogie up!
It might be a match over here. I'm sorry.
Boogie back! Here we go! Boogie up!
Okay, I can cut it, Ashley. Thank you so much. So again, I'll just invite some reflection. What stayed with you, or what did you notice in that piece?
Ashley, can we go to the chat room? Perhaps we can get some responses from some of our guests who are out there in the virtual, and those questions can be comments, questions addressed to Barbara, to Rick, or to our colleagues in the room who are responsible for this incredible manifestation of a place for dialogue. So we have time for 3 or 4, and then we'll from the chat room, and then we'll ask each of our guests to make closing comments.
Sure. So there is a comment, and I believe it's from the first video that we watched, from Dr. Sharon Williams.
Okay.
That representation and agency are important. That was
The
it.
representation, Dr. Sharon Williams, our genealogist par excellence from the community, who will be our spotlight guest, by the way, in November, on November 17th.
Excellent.
Please come out here. That was a comment. Do you have another?
Say more.
Karen says, love the focus on celebration to help generate understanding.
To help generate understanding.
I think Brett's work really, helps us remember, and perhaps both videos, that dialogue isn't always just sitting in a circle, that the dialogue may be happening over making the dolls. The dialogue may be happening in the exchange on those walls with folks, and the interaction is real. And I loved the interviews that let you know that this was working for people. They were engaging. They were engaged.
Barb, here in Harrisburg, as part of our lead abatement training, we did mask making around festival, because lead mask itself as different things. It masks itself as sugar. So Latinx communities who knew about mask making and storytelling through mask were able to be taught of it. Likewise, we did a program called Grandmothers and Griots, where young kids went in to talk to grandparents about what's behind your walls and the walls of society, and taking down these walls and finding things that have poisoned us, using history and memory. And other questions from our?
Great.
There's a comment from William Cleveland. Bill?
William Taylor Cleveland is with us. Yay! William Taylor Cleveland, Bill Cleveland will be our guest presenter in November. So
excellent. Well, he's got his own share of stories of change and dialogue.
Yes.
But Bill here really does bring us, to the fact that it is not the artist in the center. As much as Animating Democracy has worked to show and shine a light on the roles that the arts and artists can play, it's not in the middle of the room that is the most effective place. And that's a real piece. In both videos, I think one thing that I connect very much to your work in Harrisburg is that you have to have those traditions and the work of practicing your culture and cultural practices to have those strengths to bring in. So if there had not been in Hawaii a place where they were studying hula ki'i and story and talk story as a methodology, if they didn't know how to make puppets and make hula dances, they would not have been able to use all of that in that work. And similarly, Breck was incredibly, he knew his community. He knew how to bring out those various creative talents and put them together in a way that made sense. It is really the everyone being engaged. Bill, so good to see you here.
Did we get Bill's comment or statement?
The key here to me, being Bill, is agency. So many artists are portrayed as the principal doer. In Brett's project, he reminds us that the real change is personal. The citizen is the doer.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. We have time for one or two more, and then we'll ask some closing. Do you have? So our monument at one end of the block is called a gathering at the crossroads. A gathering at the crossroads is because the sign, the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission sign, says that in 1859, Frederick Douglass spoke on that corner, and 1,000 people turned out at the crossroads to hear him speak about citizenship and the vote. So the story is told in animation and tableau in the monument, but the act of the gathering is unfolded in this room and in the center through the series sponsored by Giant and the collection developed by the McCormick Library. So I'd like to ask those of you who are in the audience to give us a little advice. From what you've heard today, this is the first of 8 conversations about animating this space through the art of dialogue, and then taking that dialogue out into our own communities. You know what we're up to, you know where we've come from, you know what our challenges are. If you could precede the statement by "it seems to me that," give us a little advice about how we might bring your constituents, your community, your affinity group into this room and into this dialogue. Sir, you cross so many communities. You have passports in so many communities. Would you start? It seems to me that. Where should we go? How should we invigorate? How should we cook up these 8 recipes to serve the community?
I say keep doing what you're doing. Let's explore ways to get youth involved in this room and be a part of the process.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was gonna say, right, I don't know how old Kimeka is, but making sure you have that cradle to grave, right? Get them while they're young and then turn them into the history detectives, I think is a great idea. Or include them as history detective juniors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
It seems to me we need to find our way into the classroom.
Find our way into the classroom.
One of the things that has struck me in my own research and then working with the history detectives and the memory is that very often, whenever I bring up, for instance, T. Morris Chester, it is the first time that people have heard it. And I'm talking about well-educated people, not so educated people. They just don't know. And one of the principal ways that we change that in theory is to affect education. Elementary, secondary, college. So that's one of the things that I'm interested in helping in some way.
And I would also say lifelong learning.
Yeah.
We know that it is a statement that Americans take their kids to kindergarten and pick them up at college, and that the learning is placed upon that institution, and that our importance that the community as a school without walls is participating. Susan, you've participated in this conversation in literally as an educator, as an innovator, as a change agent. How can you know, I'm from New Orleans. How can we make this more better? You know, how can we make the series more
We have
better?
to do more and more and more.
You know, like,
We are, I think, you know, on a, we here at the library are at a crossroads as well in terms of embracing inclusiveness, and we have to do a better job at how we actually realize that. I think we have, we've made progress, but we have a long way to go. And I think through your programming and the programming that we're hearing through Live and Learn is really going to be of help. But I think your key is also very important, that we have to somehow engage younger kids in this process. We have to get to the youth.
may I ask all of you who are out there, November 17th is our next Live and Learn Animating Democracy Series. Our spotlight will be on Sharon Williams, who has the really incredible genealogy program here, and young people and elders alike are turning to. Thank you, Henry Louis Gates, and thank you, Ancestry.com, for waking us up about the importance of connecting the past to the present and the future. But she'll be here to talk about her genealogy groups that meet at the West Bank, am I correct? West Bank Library, West Shore. The West Bank is New Orleans. I'm back in New Orleans again.
Yeah.
Sorry, at the West Shore. Our change agent will be Rachel Williams. No connection to Sharon Williams, but maybe cousins. And Rachel Williams is working on the Lincoln Cemetery project and the renewal of the Lincoln Cemetery. And about 60% of our 100 voices are buried at the Lincoln Cemetery. And Andy, we want to begin to move on thinking of the Lincoln Cemetery as a museum underground, and that there is bringing the families home in conservation. Our main speaker, our keynote speaker, will be Bill Cleveland, who has been collecting stories from change agents and artists and artivists, and will be giving us a cookbook. I also have to say, Ayasha, that Bill is one of the masters on art in other places, talking about art from hospitals to prisons to, you know, places that we really don't think about. May I ask those in the room and those who are joining us virtually, if you'll be so kind as to bring a guest with you, either virtually or realistically. We'll have hospitality in this room, and we will have the courtesy of having you have the ability to follow up with us, thanks to Dauphin County Library System, DCLS.org, TMC Welcome Center. DCLS.org, TMC Welcome, Thomas Morris Chester Welcome Center. Go to our website, follow us. You'll have a place to log on your conversations. We'll end now for this evening if there aren't other things, for two reasons. One is because I'd like you all to get to know each other in the room, and we also have some hospitality. And the other is because my colleagues in the library want to go home at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so we'll start a soft fade. Yes, thank you very much, Giant. We learned a great deal during COVID about reaching visitors to our circle from as far away as Ireland and Canada and Australia. We know you're out there. So we will continue this hybrid format where we will have some guests in the room, some guests here virtually. Be blessed, be careful. Each one teach one. Each one bring one back into the sun. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you so much for including me.
Thank
It
you,
was a
Bob.
pleasure
Thank
to
you,
be with
Bob.
y'all.
Thank you, Bill
All
Cleveland
good.
out there somewhere. See you next
Come
month.
back and see Bill.
Come